Well, Nathan, thank you so much for helping me with my project. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name's Nathan Stewart. Um, I live down here in Houston, originally from Pennsylvania. Um, Went to Rice for a graduate program, space studies, and now I work down here at the Johnson Space Center. So a flight controller and operations planning. Basically, make the schedules for the astronauts on board the space station every day.
I was considering going to the RICE program myself. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that, if you felt like that really
Yeah,
jump-started your career in space, or if there's other options you looked at as well.
yeah. So after I finished my undergrad, basically I just didn't know what I wanted to do for a job. So I figured I'd put that decision off for another 2 years. I had originally wanted to do something. I wanted to go to FIT and do a master's program there. But Rice was the first one to get back to me, and they brought me down and showed me the program. And it's really a program where it's pretty interdisciplinary. Um, you can do an engineering track, a science track, or kind of a management track. So I chose engineering. I took a lot of engineering courses. I took a few physics courses, a few computer science, math courses, and a lot of courses focused on space flight, uh, flight dynamics, um, orbital mechanics, that kind of stuff. But it also has a heavy focus on public speaking and communication, and just being a well-rounded individual. You know, being able to work on your pitch and talk about yourself and what you're interested in, what you want to do. Um, you know, there's a required internship, so there's no dissertation. Instead, you're required to do like a 3 month or a semester long internship. So I interned at the NASA Johnson Space Center in the safety and mission assurance group. I'm forgetting the name of it. They would kill me for not remembering it. But what I worked on was basically a project where they do, it's sort of like this. They do interviews with people from the spaceflight community, all the way from astronauts to engineers, to pilots to whatever, um, and then they put the PDF transcripts online, and you can go and read them, and they're absolutely fascinating to read through. And I kind of worked on doing a database for that. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the program in a nutshell. Is really a lot of science, engineering, and then communication and management skills.
Um, and what was the oldest person in your class?
We were all pretty young in my group. I don't think we had maybe someone in their 30s. With it, throughout the whole, it's a whole professional science masters group, and so there's also like um, bio or healthcare or something like that. There's one for subsurface geoscience is one. And so in some of the other programs, there were people, kind of mid-career, their mid 40s, looking to either, take their career in a different direction or get another degree to advance on. But the space studies program was pretty young at that point. There was only maybe 8 of us in that program when I was in there.
And what's the time commitment?
It's a year and a half, so it's 3 semesters plus the internship. So you can do the internship, over your first summer is what a lot of people do. I did it during my what would be my third semester, and so I deferred, and so it took me a full 2 years, like a regular master's, but full time schooling. Some people do it part time, but then they stretch it out to 3 or 4 years.
Now, you mentioned after you got your bachelor's, you weren't sure what to do, and then you went into the space studies program. Is that because you had a lifelong or interest in space, or like what kind of led you to that?
Yeah, I always was fascinated by space as a kid. I never really thought I would do anything in that environment for a career. I did physics undergrad, and that's kind of what I was going to do. I wanted to be a physicist, but I had a professor, Dr. Fisher, who was like a NASA fanatic. I mean, this guy is literally a walking encyclopedia of NASA history. It's incredible. And I took a couple classes with him, spent a lot of time talking with him. We kind of revived the SPS program at our school, the Society of Physics Students. So we took some trips to like NASA Goddard Space Center, out to some observatories, that kind of thing. And spending time with that professor really kind of gave me that passion, kind of brought it back from when I was a child. And that's when I decided, when I was applying for graduate programs, that I wanted to do something space related and I wanted to go down that path.
And you mentioned that you work in a group that does the timelines and scheduling for the astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had heard, whenever Apple had came out with their Newton a long time ago in like the 1990s, so that was one of the applications they thought it might be good for. Um, but I mean, how does that process work? I mean, how do you make the most out of the astronauts' time?
Yeah, so crew time is probably the most expensive resource on board. Takes a lot of time and money and effort to get somebody there, and when you're up there, we want to use them efficiently. Science is the main focus of the ISS, with a healthy amount of time spent on maintenance. It's 20 years old, and it really wasn't meant to last this long. So there's a lot of work that goes into maintaining it. But it's a again a interdisciplinary approach. So you have all these different flight control teams of different backgrounds. You have EVA, which is spacewalks. You have Cronus, which is communications, or like ADCO, which is actually moving the station around in space. And then you have all the scientific payloads, which come from Marshall Space Flight Center. And so everybody's vying for time to get their activities done. And so they all come through us, and we just coordinate with everybody, and we take inputs, and we juggle things around on the timeline. We say, scratch that. We're going to put this in here. It's a very iterative process with a lot of communication back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
And do y'all use any special software? Or, I mean, like, how do y'all manage it?
We have like in-house software. I think it was originally designed for uh, Mars rovers by JPL, and then
Okay.
somehow they adapted it for us to be able to use as our planning software for the ISS. Um, yeah, it's all the tools we use. I think are pretty much built in house, and most of them run off of Internet Explorer. So that gives you an idea of how old these tools are. Some of them are not faring so well.
Um, you mentioned the ISS is getting old, and wasn't expected to live this long. I was just thinking, the ISS is like a modular system that was built in pieces.
Mhm.
Oh, why couldn't we just like kind of replace the modules on a routine basis?
Yeah, so that would be possible for the Russian segment. It's basically Russian and a U.S. and partners split into two. The Russian segments all came up on top of rockets, and we still have those rockets today. So if we wanted to, we could build more Russian segments. Those are very long and uh, rocket shaped. They fit on the nose of a rocket. The ISS modules are a bit wider, a bit fatter, and those all came up in the shuttle payload bay, and we don't have the shuttle capacity anymore. So if we wanted to add on to the station, it would look a bit different. The modules would probably not be as expansive as the ones that are currently up there, but we've done some additions. We've added some things that were like pressurized payloads, payload workspaces that went in the shuttle that were a bit smaller. We've added those on. We've added an expandable module built by Bigelow Aerospace. That was quite a few years ago. It's still up there and it's still doing well. So that's something they want to keep adding. And one of the plans going forward, and I'm sure you probably have heard about, is I think it's Axiom Space is looking to build a commercial space station. And basically, they want to start by attaching it to the ISS and kind of building off the ISS. And then once the ISS reaches end of life, they can separate it and it'll become its own free flying space station, privately owned, which is a really fascinating and exciting endeavor.
And I'm just thinking like the new Glenn rocket's supposed to have its first flight this year,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe it has um, what is it, a 6 meter payload fairing? Forget about how, but I'm
Yeah,
just
I don't know
wondering
exactly how large.
if that might be big enough for one of the more traditional shuttle-based modules.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might be large enough. I'm certainly like, when Starship starts flying, definitely would be large enough. But then again, it's a matter of funding, and um, it can be a struggle. The lawmakers have a struggle sometimes passing extensions on the lifetime of the ISS. I think they do like 4-year terms. I've a lot of people say by 2030 is pretty much like when it's going to end. I think it'd probably be easier to just start over rather than replace and make it something new, just to start with a whole new thing and get private companies involved to shoulder some of the cost.
I just wonder about the end of the ISS. I guess the default end is deorbiting and burning up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the plan is. Personally, I would love if they could boost it out to a graveyard orbit, and preserve it as a museum, and maybe someday people can go and visit it, and a living history kind of exhibit. Most likely, yeah, it'll probably be deorbited. I don't know. I guess they'd have to deorbit it in sections. There's no way they'd let that whole thing just come down where it lands. And probably try to aim for the Pacific, but I'm not sure on the specifics of what they plan to do.
Yeah, the graveyard yard orbit definitely sounds a lot better to me, but I just wonder about the mechanics behind that in terms of
Yeah,
how much how much would it take to boost it so high?
yeah, and it's a very fragile spaceship. I mean, it's not. You could go along the truss, I guess, but you'd have to really start slow and build up velocity to move it. I don't know. That's a problem for the ad codes to figure out. I just move activities on the timeline.
But you have that what is it, the electric thrust one, the one that spits out the xenons. I understand that the actual acceleration is really small, but they could keep it up and pretty much indefinitely.
Yeah, and you can just slowly build it up over time.
Exactly. Yeah, might be
Yeah,
further out than the moon at some point. Just like,
yeah. Be like Elon's Tesla just racing around the solar system.
oh, exactly. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing. Um, yeah, Bigelow Aerospace. At the beginning of this pandemic, I understood they laid off everybody, and they've always been a little bit more on the quieter side. Do you know what they're up to?
I have no idea what they're up to. I did not hear. I didn't know that they had laid a lot of people off.
Yeah, apparently they laid off everybody. I think it was like March of 2020.
Oh,
Um,
I mean, they're bringing them back. I assume. I hope.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they just certified the big the module, I think last year or something, to be able to hold like scientific payloads or something. Like there's levels of safety rating, and it got bumped up to another safety rating. So I know that's an avenue they wanted to explore. That is worrisome that they laid everybody off.
That's what I understand. You know, um, I only know. Anyway, uh, I hope they do bring everybody back and that there's still a going concern because I like to see a lot more expandable modules. I know other companies are
Yeah,
working on it too.
yeah, it's a fascinating technology.
Um, so when did you find out that we are planning to send people to the moon in 2024?
Whenever Mike Pence made that speech, what was it, like 2 years ago at this point? It took
Exactly.
everyone by surprise. We had been planning for 2028, and it was something that, in my mind, I had just started at NASA. 2028 is a long way off I'm only 26, so I was like, well, I probably won't even be here when that happens, and is it going to happen? Knowing the history of NASA programs, they get cut, they get defunded, they get pushed back. It was kind of a pipe dream. So yeah, when I heard 2024, I was excited. I thought, cool, this is gonna light a fire under NASA's butt and like force them to actually work towards this goal. But I was also very skeptical of us being able to reach that goal because it didn't seem to come out of any. I mean, as far as I know, it didn't seem to come out of any sort of analysis of how to do it. It just seemed like the president and the vice president were like, "Hey, we want that to happen by the time that we might still be in office," which at this point we all know isn't going to happen. But yeah, I was taken by surprise for sure.
Do you think it's more likely to happen by 2028 now that we've kind of made the 2024 deadline?
Yeah, I think 2028 is a definite by that time. I mean, a lot of work has happened in the last 2 years. We have SLS launches planned for this year, hopefully, not too far away, which would be super exciting to finally see that thing fly and see the Orion capsule finally be used for what it's meant to be used for. Um, Before the pandemic, I would have said that I think we'd probably hit 2024. At this point, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. 2026 is where I'd put my money if I had to bet on it.
And I mean, I'm just thinking back, like 14 months ago, we had Artemis Day, where the core stage complete, and
Yeah,
moving it over to I guess, the Stennis Center to um, actually do the green run testing, which is scheduled for, I think, what, the 17th?
yeah, yeah,
So hopefully all that goes well.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of progress is being made, so it's exciting. And they just announced the crew members. I don't, not for a specific mission, but the general Artemis crew was announced just last month, I think. So, I mean, we're still pushing ahead, full tilt with it. Hopefully, we just get the money and we get the everything goes well.
Yeah, I think the strategy of trying to build up the momentum just so that people keep going, that's great.
Exactly, because a lot of times these things get canceled, by different administrations, and I mean, it stands to reason that Joe Biden, his whole thing is unity and kind of erasing the last 4 years would want to reverse a lot of those policies. But NASA and Jim Bridenstine, who's another Rice alum, who's the current administrator, exactly like you said, they've built up a lot of momentum. And there's no way that you can just pull the rug out from under this at this point. I could see maybe you ramp it down over time, but I mean, these rockets are being built. We got to use them for something. So I think we're pretty committed at this point.
One concern I have is the why of why we're going back to the moon and what people hear as the why and what resonates with them. But before getting to that, I was just reminded of the fact that very few people actually know we're going to the moon. Most
Yeah,
of the people I talk to have no clue that we're planning to send people to the moon in 2024.
yeah. I've had a lot of similar conversations with people where they're totally taken by surprise. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize we have the ISS up there, let alone that it's been there for 20 years. And then when we say, yeah, we're going to be on the moon in 3 years, I mean, complete shock.
Um, and I guess, what do you think we should be doing differently? It seems like a lot of the problem we run into is that people don't know what's going on. They misunderstand the relative amounts we're spending on like human space exploration versus other things. And there's a lot of kind of like jumbled facts up there. I mean, even like the concept of being in orbit is something that I think is very mysterious for people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely something that people don't have an intuitive understanding of spaceflight in general. There's a lot of, and I think Hollywood and TV shows play a lot into that of people not really understanding how it works or the way it's actually done. If you watch a Hollywood movie, people are jumping around and going outside the station and shooting off lasers in space, and and none of that happens, and none of it happens the way that we don't get there the way that it's portrayed in Hollywood. So I would like to see a little bit more focus on the actual nuts and bolts of it. Um, One thing that really gets me is like you watch The Martian or that TV show with Hilary Swank that just came out, um, and NASA is so futuristic. It's got all these glass windows, and this beautiful steel, and just like clearly they spent a lot of money building up these centers. And the only one that even comes close to that in the world is SpaceX Control. I mean, Johnson Space Center is old, man. It was built in the early 60s, and it looks like it was built in the early 60s. And when I bring people on site to show them, that's the first thing that they always point out. It's like, wow, this is NASA. Like, what's going on here? This isn't what I expected. Um, so I'd like if TV shows and movies could show a more realistic idea of what we have right now. Because when people say, we spend too much money on space and it's off the Earth, like, I could argue about that for days. But the thing that the reason people think that, I think, is because they look at movies and TV shows and they see these big grandiose places, and they go, why is all my tax money going to this? How much money must be going to this? And to build something like, in The Martian, yeah, that's a lot of tax dollars. And I would be hesitant about spending that. But in reality, I mean, NASA gets what, 20 odd $billion a year. And it all goes into the mission, like we don't have cushy offices. My desk is probably the same desk that's been there for 50 years. So when people say we're spending too much money, I'd like them to have a more realistic picture of what it actually is. But that's my little rant about that.
I know I hate to get into it, but uh, yeah, I wonder about the Boeing and executive and Lockheed Martin's executives' desk. I bet you they're not 50 years old.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, that's where all the money's going.
The
It's on
money's
these
going, yeah.
contractors. Yeah.
Uh, but talking about going to Mars, a lot of people think that going to Mars is just an extended version of going to the moon. And I was reading Rod Pyle's book. I think it's called um, Shuttle Houston or Houston Shuttle or something like that, and he was like one of the flight directors during the shuttle program.
Okay.
And he kind of goes into a lot of the details around mission, how mission control works, and supporting of the space shuttle and stuff like that. And I think that the part that's really amazing to me from reading that book is the astronauts actually don't do that much compared to the total amount of work that's being done, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
essentially the eyes and hands for an entire organism on the ground,
Yeah. Yeah. That's completely accurate. Yeah.
which is great if you're only, less than a second latency.
Hmm.
But what happens whenever you start expanding that to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour?
Yeah.
Now you have to have that entire knowledge base, which is going to be completely disconnected from the internet. There's
Yeah.
no uh, YouTube searches for how do I repair an air leak, and
Exactly. Yeah.
uh, I mean, I think the challenge with going to Mars is that really we've never sent people into space at all. We've sent a person to space supported by an entire organization.
Yeah. That is a really good way of phrasing that. Yeah. I mean, it's like the ISS flies itself. Um, well, the ground team flies the ISS. For in the astronauts' eyes, it flies itself. All the commanding is done by the ground. The astronauts are not sitting up there, turning the station around and making it go where they want it to go. And they have the only time they really do much of anything is, maybe when they're docking, if they have some free flight opportunities. But yeah, if they're on the other side of Mars, you can't just call down and say, Houston, hey, we've got a problem here. What do you guys think we should do? And Houston, sends back an answer. Yeah, it's going to be an hour trip. And in that point, the crew could be dead, or the mission could be compromised. So yeah, we have to be a lot more autonomous. That's a big stepping stone. That's a culture shift, I think, for NASA to be more hands off in a way and trust the crew and trust the vehicle. It's bad for me because then there's less flight control positions. So, but that's going to be a difficult move, and that's pretty far away. Nobody's thinking too seriously about that at this point. We all recognize what we need to do, and the rumblings are starting. But again, with Moon being the focus, my personal opinion, I think we're going to get to the Moon, and we will be stuck at the Moon for 50 years before we go to Mars, just like we've been stuck in low Earth orbit now for 50 years. That's just the nature of the beast. You get somewhere when you rely on public funding, you get somewhere and it's exciting and people are all for it, and then interest drops, budget drops, and then you just have to be content with where you are until you can build that up again. Personally, I think the first people on Mars are not going to be NASA astronauts, or if they are, it's going to be on a private vehicle of some sort, because they have the ambition and the funding and the ability to raise capital in a way that you're going to need to be able to go to Mars. I mean, that's going to be a really expensive endeavor that I don't think the American taxpayer is going to want to take on.
But I personally would be fine if we got stuck on the moon for 50 years. If we got stuck
Oh, I'd be totally
on the
fine with that.
moon, not
Yeah,
not
on,
around
on
the
the
moon,
surface,
on the
on the
surface.
surface. Yeah, no, I'd be so thrilled with that. That would be incredible. Um, yeah, let's get there. Let's put boots on the ground, and let's keep boots on the ground, and learn how, because that's something we have to do for Mars. I mean, if you land on Mars, you're stuck there for what, 18 months or so before you can come back. We don't know how to live on another planetary body. We've done it on the moon for what, 3 days. Um, 3 days versus 18 months, it's a very different story. We spent a lot of time free floating in space, so I'm not too concerned about the journey back and forth from Mars. But yeah, if we want to if we want to live on Mars, we have to spend a lot of time on the moon and figure out how we're going to do this kind of stuff. And I think that's when that automation will start coming up and really taking off.
But also, actually, on the surface of the moon, if you're doing like discovery and exploration and, actually mining resources on the moon, even just to find out what they are and what you could do with them, I mean, what if we're actually able to build physical structures on the moon using moon's material? That would be a huge step forward, I think.
Yeah, that would be really exciting. Yeah, I mean, and again, that's stuff that we have to do if we want to go to Mars. You can't. I mean, I guess you could send a whole bunch of cargo ships, but that's kind of risky. yeah, at some point you're going to need the capability, the backup redundancy to be able to build uh, your own shelter. And that's what they say the moon is the proving ground for Mars, which it really is. We have to learn to do everything there and do it well and be very comfortable with it before we can even think about doing it on Mars.
But coming back to the why, um, you know, Mike Pence, when he made the announcement, said we're going to land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. And that sounds great, right? The problem with that is why do you go back, right? I mean, the amazing thing about the Apollo program is not that it stopped after Apollo 17, but that we actually had an Apollo 12. Like that's the
Yeah,
mystery. Why do we have an Apollo 12?
yeah, yeah. And the you know space nerds and scientists like to say it's for the science and the discovery. And that's all fair and noble, but that's not what people care about. That's not why people write checks. Um, yeah, and again, Apollo is a great example of after Apollo 11 and probably after Apollo 13. I mean, interest waned, and we were supposed to do more missions, and they got canceled. So yeah, why do we go back to the moon? I don't know. I'll try to think of what the NASA talking points are, but personally, for me, it's the thrill and the exploration of it. Obviously, the science, um, but just pushing ourselves. Like we've gotten really comfortable in low Earth orbit, and NASA was not founded to be a comfortable agency. It was founded to push the envelope, and push the boundaries, and that's what I mean. That's what you need a government agency to do, because the private companies aren't going to do it if there's no economic benefit to it. Whereas the government is kind of allowed to just throw money at things. Um, yeah, why we go back that's a question I struggle with, because people always want really really noble answers, and for me it's just the thrill of it, plain and simple. We haven't we haven't spent a lot of time there. There's going to be a lot of firsts, and I want to see new things happen.
Yeah, I really think it comes down to people's long range views of humanity.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, if you think humans are destined to end when the Earth ends, and that Earth is all we need, why go to space at all?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's some religious traditions that talk about the end of the world. At some point the entire simulation would be turned off, but and there's other views where humans are expanding to the moon, to Mars, to Venus, to the moons of Jupiter and the moons of Saturn, and we create like these huge ships that are able to take these multi-generation journeys to other star systems, and before long, the entire galaxy is filled with human civilizations, or at least human, um, you know, uh, the derivatives of human civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, if that second one is your view of the future of humanity, going to the moon is like just like learning to crawl. I mean, that's
Exactly.
like,
It's taking your first little baby step.
yeah. I mean, it's like, why should babies, learn anything? They're completely
Exactly.
fed. They're taken care of. Why
Yeah. Why
get out
should
the
they learn
crib?
to stand up? Why should they learn to talk? Why should they learn to, use a cell phone? They've got everything they need. That's a good argument. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, they just, wow, and immediately people run in. You
Yeah.
see like this, 30-year-old baby in a crib, and it's like, oh, that's what humanity's become. We're just
Yeah.
stunted civilization.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's innate in humans. Why do we read books? Why do we go hiking and exploring? There's something about us that wants more and wants to be better, or become more than what we are right now. Maybe it's a lack of contentment. I don't know. That's part of our drive. But like you said, I mean, that's the first step. Is you know why did we leave the cradle of civilization? Why did we travel to Europe? Why did we cross the oceans and come to America? Why do we go to the moon? It's just the natural progression of things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is if people saw progress, they might be more enthused about it. But I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, yeah, eventually, future generations will be living on the moon. And the struggle that I have is what's going to change between now and those generations that could not change now? I mean, like, why can't it happen in the next 10, 20 years that we have
Yeah,
little villages on the moon?
yeah,
Uh, I mean, don't see why it couldn't.
yeah. No, it's totally, all the technology is there. It's just a matter of getting people to want to do it. And I think that's something that the early space program really had going for it. I mean, you had the first satellite, you had the first dog, you had the first human in space, you had these rockets that were evolving rapidly, and you were seeing the tests happen in real time. You're seeing them go up and explode. You were seeing them go up and be successful, and then larger rockets and larger rockets. Um, and then it stalled, after the Saturn V. Um, I think I think you brought up a good point that if people saw that progress being done, and that's not to say progress isn't being done right now. It's just much slower, and a lot of it's more. You have to dig for it a little bit. It's not front page news. Whereas, like, I love the coverage that the Demo 2 mission got over the summer. Everybody was talking about it and going, "Wow, we're sending humans back into space." And like, well, we've always had humans in space, for the last 20 years, but we're sending them back from American soil. American rockets, yada yada yada. Um, that's the excitement that we need to keep up. And it's incredible. History repeats itself. When we did the first the Crew Dragon mission, which went up in November, I think, the excitement was gone already. Like, people were like, "Oh yeah, this thing's happening." Where Demo 2 people were like having watch parties and came out to the Cape, and it was all over the news. And that was just 2 people for a short mission. Then we send 4 people for a long range mission, and it's already lost that shine. Um,
Well, I would also say though you had the COVID factor as well. Um, a
True, but
lot of
we had
people.
the COVID factor during Demo 2.
No,
So
that's true. That's true. But I think a lot of people risk reward, like being there for the very first launch, being versus being there for the second launch. People
yeah.
are like, it's worth taking the risk to be there for such a historic thing. But
Yeah,
I think once COVID goes away, you'll see a lot more enthusiasm
I
about.
hope so. Yeah, and I think once we have these SLS launches starting, I think that's gonna be the thing that keeps that sustained interest, because they're not doing the same thing with every launch. Where Demo 2 and Crew Dragon, it's essentially the same mission. These SLS launches, first we're just trying to get it up there and see what happens. Then we're trying to go around the moon. Then we're taking a person to go around the moon. Then we're landing on the moon. Where each time it's each launch is going to be momentous and historic, and people are going to want to be there for the first, because it's always going to be a first. And I think that's the kind of thing that we always need to be pushing at least a little bit to continue to bring people into this.
Yeah, and but the first crude launch of SLS is going to have the first Canadian to go around the moon, which is kind of interesting. So we get to kind of spread around those
Yeah,
first to other countries as well.
yeah, yeah, and it's going to be. I mean, that's the beauty of space exploration now, is it's so international. It's a partnership, and to get all these other countries on board, and to get the support of not just their governments but their people, and their passion. That's the next hallmark of spaceflight. Whereas in the '60s, the U.S. was super into it, and the Russians were super into it, and everyone else was just kind of watching it happen. This time, you can see someone that maybe speaks your language, or is your skin color, or has your accent or whatever, taking that step on the moon, or floating with the moon behind them. That's speaks a lot more to all of humanity than just watching some old white guys go up there.
Yeah, I know. I hate it that I happen to be approaching the old white guys category.
It's just the cards we were dealt. At some point, we're
I
both going to be old white guys, and it's just the way.
nobody sent us to the moon, or maybe they'll
Yeah,
send us to the moon for free. I'm not sure.
yeah. It's going to be one or the other.
One or the other. Um, so if it was safe and affordable, would you go to space?
Oh, in a heartbeat, no questions asked. Yeah, I
Like,
would.
where would you go? Like the orbit or to the moon, or would you take a one-way trip to Mars?
Wherever they'd let me go. I don't care. I'm not picky. Um, I mean, I would love to be able to do even those short flights that they're hopefully starting soon. The tourism where you just go up and you can see the curvature of the Earth, and you get a few moments of weightlessness, and you come back down. Be happy with that. If they want to send me to the ISS, sure. I don't want to go to the ISS for 6 months and do the work of an astronaut. They are very busy people, and I don't want to be that busy. But I would go to the moon. I'd go to Mars. Yeah, send me one way mission to Mars. give me another 20 years on Earth, and then I'll do a one-way mission to Mars.
But can you imagine what that'd be like, going to Mars? I mean, you deal with these astronauts and you see the cabins that they're in. I mean, you're in like this very small confined space continuously. I mean, it's like COVID is like free and open compared to what these astronauts go through.
Yeah, yeah. You being confined to your apartment is still in no way close to what the astronauts have to go through. Um, yeah, and then it's the isolation and the psychological aspect. I think would be the hardest for me personally, of not feeling the sun on your face, or the wind through my lack of hair, or smelling whatever smells are out there. It's a very sterilized environment, and to do that long term takes a lot of training and a certain caliber of person.
And plus, whenever you're like stepping on the surface of the moon or the surface of Mars, you're really not there. I mean, like you're completely isolated.
Exactly.
Only thing you're really sense that you're able to get anything from is like your eyes. Like the
Yeah.
sound you hear is all from your communications equipment and the background noise of your breathing and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you pick up something, you're not going to feel it. It's going to be like having these huge mittens on your hands. You'll be able to look at rocks, but uh, it's like it just. I think I think a lot of people would really reconsider their attitudes about going themselves if they actually had a more realistic view of what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not you're gonna get there and you're gonna, be like, oh well, the journey might take a while and that'd be rough. But once I get there, I'll be walking around, I'll be on the ground, well, no, like you said, you're gonna be confined at all times in this protective layer, in this protective bubble, and you're never gonna feel, the regolith run through your fingers like you would sand on a beach. That'll never happen. You'll never. I mean, I guess they said you could smell space and you could smell the moon when you were in the cabin, but you're never gonna stand there and feel a Martian breeze, on your face. Um, yeah, I mean that's a good point. I think when you point those sort of things out to people, it definitely gives them pause.
I I think like the Mars One project, which said they had like thousands of people willing to do one-way trips to Mars. I personally think all those people were thinking about their place in society once they returned. Even though they talked
Yeah,
about it being in one place, it's just like everybody's needs significance. And like, you know, it's so hard to find in life, what makes us significant. That being able to associate oneself to like a milestone of humanity like that is, I think a lot of people just kind of crave that.
yeah, yeah, and they aren't gonna get that. I mean, maybe they'll get it through their cell phones while they're there, and they can go on their Facebook and see them being exalted here on Earth, but they're never going to come back and have that ceremony or the parades like the moonwalkers did. It's going to be a kind of sad and lonely life watching it all happen from millions of miles away.
Yeah, exactly. No real-time communications with Earth, even.
Yeah,
And yeah.
yeah, and you said you talked about the thousands of people that applied. Thousands of people apply to be astronauts every selection, and they pick what 10 or 12. Um, so yeah, when I think about all the people that will sign up for a trip like that, and I think how many of those people would actually make the trip and be successful at it, and it's a very, very small number of those people.
Yeah. And that's just from like the US that applied to be astronauts. I mean, I've
Yeah,
talked to people in Egypt and in Pakistan who have dreams about becoming an astronaut, and I'm like, wow, somehow you need to get your government to create a space program. You need to become a US or European citizen. It's just like that path is like so much harder
yeah,
than
it's a
than
very narrow path with a lot of huge roadblocks, and it's a shame. Again, I mean, I recognize obviously the security protocols and everything, that you can't just let whoever you want be an astronaut, but I mean, it makes me take pause and really think of how lucky I am to be in a country where I can even work in the industry. The program at Rice, we've had Rice has a lot of international students, and we've had students who were far better students than I were, far better suited for positions than I were, and they couldn't get them because they weren't a US citizen. And it's like it's hard for me to oh, I don't know what the right word is, but when they talk about, oh, I'm not able to do that, I have to go back and find something in my own country, and it's like I just have to not say anything because what can I say at that point? And be like, yeah, was born here and now I have this opportunity. Like it's unfair, but I'm thankful that at least I'm able to do
I know. I think the same thing. And then you look at the events of this previous week, and you think those people have no clue about
it.
the opportunities they have versus other people in the rest of the world.
Yeah, yeah. The privilege that we're afforded just for being born where we are, and then so many people squander that.
I mean, they don't know what they have. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
we swim in freedom. A fish has no clue what water is. I tell you, they we have no
Yeah.
idea what air is. You know, you start taking it away, I guarantee you, our conceptions of it change quickly.
Yeah.
um, have you heard of Space Hero?
Space Hero. I don't think so.
Okay, so this is a reality TV show contest. It's going to be global that
Oh,
kicks off this year
I have heard of. This is the one where are they going to send them to the ISS? I think is the eventual goal.
for 10 days. Yeah, and Axiom Space is committed to being the ones to transport them, and they're already having an all Axiom Space private crew later this year. So I tend to
Wow.
think that this is probably the most credible venture like this to date. So
Yeah.
I think they might actually do it.
And again, it's one of those things where you can get a more realistic picture out to people, in a very easy to digest way. I mean, reality TV, who doesn't watch that? Um,
And
from the
plus global, I mean that Egyptian and
exactly,
that Pakistani, they could sign up. I mean, I think they would appreciate way more than anybody in the US, Canada, or Europe would. I,
yeah, I would expect them to fight a lot harder for it. Um, but and then looking at it from the other side of like the logistics side of from planning and everything, and oh man, it's gonna be interesting. They're talking about Tom Cruise going up to film a movie. You know, I don't know. It's a little weird because I want I feel very hypocritical in a way. I really want these things to happen, and I want this um, the passion of space to be shared with everybody, and I want realistic space to be shared with everybody. But at the same time, it's a little bit like that's my space station. Like you can't have a reality TV show or a movie star going up there. Like, no, this is for serious astronauts only. So I do feel very hypocritical and a little bit conflicted on those feelings. But I will definitely be tuning in every week to watch that reality TV show if that actually airs for sure.
and Dennis Tito, the very first space tourist who went up on a Soyuz rocket, I think in like 2001 or 2002, something really like that. I was reading that story, and the pushback they got from NASA is just unbelievable. I mean, basically, NASA's telling the Russians, we can't tell you what to do with your segment. He's not allowed to go into the U.S. segment, and kind of, and you know, I mean, space tourism is the one natural like export of space, right? I mean, it's like everything else is
Yeah,
kind of unproven, like space mining, not really sure, but individuals wanting to go, that I think is a
yeah,
real
that's the
market.
one we know we have a market for that, tried and true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's um, I don't know. Again, it's that thing of like I want that to happen, and it's a great way to bring money into the program as well. But like, what do you do with them when they're up there? I wish we had once Axiom, builds their space station. I'd be all for it and just say keep them in the Axiom side. It's way nicer. It's going to be prettier. It's going to be more fit for a tourist. Whereas in the ISS, we're doing science every single day. I mean, their days are completely blocked up. Um, I don't want some free floating tourist getting in the way of this. How do I schedule around a tourist schedule of what are they going to be doing? Are they just going to be sitting in the cupola all day? Like you got to get out of the cupola. We got to exercise near there. Um, so it's a logistical nightmare in my head, but I would love for a tourist focused space station to be up there and send people there. But where we're trying to get other work done, I don't see how it meshes quite as well.
I know you had to add time on your schedule for explaining to you how the bathroom it uses, and then listening to their feedback on how the bathroom is. And then,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think the answer is to put them to work, honestly.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. If we can train them to maybe work just one specific payload, for a week long payload while they're up there, and that's the thing that they do. Um, yeah, and if they're from a different country, have it be a payload from that country of those scientists or those university students, and find a little spot, where they're out of the way, put them in the Columbus module, and just let them stay there and work on that science. And of course, explore space and take pictures, and do the photo ops and the PAO events and all that stuff. But yeah, that's a good workaround is just get them one specific thing to focus on while they're up there.
Yeah, that'd be good. You can't make it too formal, otherwise they're like, "Why am I not getting paid astronaut pay?
Exactly.
Why did I pay to come up here?"
Yeah. Yeah, you got to strike that balance between leisure and actually making it worth your while for putting them up there.
Yeah, and I mean, trying to make sure the crews are good, even for 10 days in a completely isolated environment. You just can't send anybody. You need somebody that doesn't upset the crew.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, crews train together for months, years, sometimes before they fly. So like that's something reality TV shows. The natural conclusion of the TV show would be them launching, right? Or maybe even them landing. But the way space works is the natural conclusion of that TV show is they get picked, and then they go into a training flow, and then 2 years later they fly. And again, it's a momentum problem of how do you keep that base and the fan base there and excited after 2 years. Maybe you keep doing the show, but then you have this backlog of people that have never flown yet, and they're like, when is this going to happen? I don't know. I'm very interested to see how they approach this and if they can pull it off.
Yeah, I think up into the first people that actually fly, I don't think anybody's gonna. I don't think a sufficient number of people will believe it's real. But I think
Yeah,
after that first group flies and they successfully come back alive, and they're able to do events, then like if they do it again, it
yeah,
would be, people would like be like, oh, this is real.
yeah. Everyone would apply. I'd apply at that point. But yeah, I would definitely be in that first camp of like, I don't see this ever happening, until it does.
Yeah, because I mean, you're talking about 55 million just for the flight to the International Space Station, plus a few more million in training and, you
Yeah,
know, ISS fees and what have you.
yeah. And then, and again, it being global, I mean, there's a lot of security protocols you have to go through. I mean, you have to get government clearance, you have to train in Russia and the US. You put your hands on a lot of really expensive hardware and technology that we don't want getting out into the world. So, what if someone from a country that we aren't diplomatically, we don't have great relationships with, wins? How do you go through the security protocols? And then what if they get disqualified at some point? Because at the end of the day, NASA and the international partners are going to be the ones to say, yes, this person's fit to fly. So maybe that all happens beforehand, I guess, and then it's a group that gets in. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, I can just see the episode where you have like the international partners, like judges on like America's Got Talent, and they're each up there doing their pitch. And, you know,
They're hitting the big red button, X,
"Arr."
no.
I mean, there's a whole episode. You should be part of the programming there too.
I should put in my application.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate talking to you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, I think we pretty much ran the gamut. It was a great conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and since you're based in Houston, I got to tell you about our North Houston Space Society. It's up here in North Houston. We have monthly meetings. In fact, we have one at 2 o'clock today. It's on Zoom, and you're more than welcome to come anytime. And if you ever want to come and like do a presentation about a day in the life of a flight controller, that
Yeah.
would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll have to I see the posts on Facebook a lot and I just haven't made the jump yet, but I have to start attending those things. I think it's a
Yeah,
it's a really great it's just a great program to have, especially
yeah,
in Houston.
yeah. We're trying to do grassroots stuff. The person that just happens to be in this geographic area, we want them to know space is happening and it's going to affect you, and it can affect you in a positive way.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
awesome. And I really enjoy this project. I've been telling my friends for the past couple of weeks. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this podcast, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's just a fascinating, like you said, another one, a time capsule of. I keep thinking of what if someone had done this before the Apollo missions, and if there was 4 years of interviews with just random people of what they thought about it. I mean, how fascinating would that be? This is going to be something that in 20, 30 years, people are going to look back on and just be completely engrossed in it.
Yeah, I think so. I think so for true. I mean, I think like the audience that this is meant for hasn't even been born yet. It's kind of like the way that I approach it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But I kind of have a conundrum. I was wondering if I get your view on. So the odds of us actually landing people on the moon in 2024 are slim. Uh, and I'm like committed, and I'm doing the countdown. Like the numbers are the number. It's like Doug Laverio and his lapel pin.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
motivated this project at the beginning. I'm counting down to the end of 2024. What do I do at the end of 2024 if we haven't landed on the moon?
Well, you can do, you can go into mission elapsed time at that point. So this is the countdown, T minus, and then
Mm.
you'll do +1, +2. Um, but in terms of time commitment, how long you've been doing this for a year now?
Yeah,
So
you're.
4 year time commitment already, and then, possibly no end in sight.
I know. You're talking about one person. You gotta go this year. Please
Yeah, like
free
just put
me,
someone
free me.
up. I think it would be incredibly noble of you to continue it, but I don't think anybody would fault you for calling it a wrap, or maybe making it less frequent.
Less frequent, like the weekly.
A weekly one, yeah, exactly. You can just count down the weeks till
Yeah,
the moon landing.
that's a good idea. Well, I'm still hoping that even if NASA doesn't quite pull off a moon landing, SpaceX or Blue Origin might surprise us.
Yeah.
But I think that may be just wishful thinking.
Yeah. Well, it's only time will tell.
Time will tell. Well, thank you so much, Nathan. You have a good rest of
Yeah.
your day and stay in touch.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, for sure. Take care.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.